that's different for your child or your teen, or if that's a sign of danger. I've actually seen some youth who look fine and calm, but inside they're actually quite anxious, and they may engage in self-harming behaviors, or they may be writing very sad, despondent things. It's not until the parent or the caregiver actually asks, what's going on with you? And maybe starting with some self-disclosure, I'm having a hard time and this is how I'm trying to cope. That may make it a little easier for the teen or the young person to share.
And if there are mild symptoms, they can be treated with doing some sort of self-care, exercising, sleeping well. But if it accelerates for more than 2 weeks, then you want to give further attention and seek professional help.
Thank you. So what you're saying that if these symptoms, if they stay on for a while, they don't sort of resolve, they don't go over by themselves, then there's reason for concern, and then someone should do something about it. Like you brought up, and Alistair also, you brought up the challenging thing with suicide, and then like it's the worst, the feared outcome of when people are struggling. But in general, how should one, as a parent or as a friend, how should you talk and approach someone you think might be struggling? You're maybe seeing some symptoms, some signs that make you worried. How would you sort of approach, how do you talk about these things?
Well, I can start with that. It's important when working or talking to young people just want to always feel like they're not different. They don't want to seem abnormal. So one thing we do is normalize what they're experiencing or maybe experiencing. And you may want to ask, I've heard a lot of other teenagers or young people struggling with the pandemic or struggling in general. And some of them have even thought about what would happen if they died or ending their life. Is that something you're struggling with? Because teenagers and young people need permission to share such thoughts, and they need to know that when they share them, that it will not really intimidate you, and that you'll listen, and that you'll support and that you'll act. But I would say normalizing it first and then asking the question, and asking quite directly, not using cute terms, but saying, have you thought about dying? Have you thought about ending your life? I think that's really important.
Any other thoughts about how to talk with someone about difficult things?
I think it's important to be real and be present for the other person, being youth or a young adult or even adults. People can sense that, and they sense when you truly are caring for. Being more as being holding space for them. Let them express. Don't be afraid if they say something that might exacerbate your feelings. That doesn't mean that they will follow through with it, but it's important for them to be heard.
I think just to add to what Lisa and Marissa said, is just to try and hold that young person to be accountable to yourself and to you as well, so that they know that you are being empathetic and that you will approach them and you will come back to them and you will follow them up, and they would value that because they feel that you're being empathetic and you really care. And I think that's very important.
And also it's important for all of those who are on the helping side to keep in mind that these thoughts are even evident before these may develop to a severe or persistent mental disorder. Like they're normal. It's part of struggling, and they can be constant.
So basically what I hear you saying, that it's a spectrum of where people can be struggling, and maybe we always should be talking with one another about how we're doing, sort of whether we have good reason, solid reason to think that someone is significantly struggling or not. Maybe we should have these kind of discussions, check in on one another, as parents, as friends, as colleagues, whatever our role is. I wonder if someone needs help. When is it time to seek professional help, and what kind of help should we seek? Do you have any thoughts on that before we wrap up? When is it time to get outside help, professional help?
I think some to that has been mentioned about the fact whenever you start noticing that your ordinary life has started changing, you're not motivated to keep doing what you used to do or finding excitement in it. You need to reach out to someone that you trust with. But if, like as mentioned too, is that if it accelerates for a longer period of time, it's immediate help. If you are hurting and are having suicidal ideation, it's important to act immediately.
And what I would add is think about this as a medical condition. Mental health is health, period. So if you have any concern, let's say your child or teenager doesn't have a therapist or they don't have a psychiatrist, if they're saying, I'm just having a hard time, that's the time to reach out for help. The time to reach out for urgent emergency type help is when they're saying that they want to hurt themselves or they want to die and they have no therapist or no psychiatrist. That's an emergency situation. But for other things where they're struggling and they could benefit from talking to someone, even if you suspect it, don't hesitate to call to talk to a social worker or a therapist or even a psychiatrist. Now, who to reach out to, it never hurts to reach out to a therapist, but in the emergency situation, seeking emergency help from a physician is really important.
And there's no harm in educating yourself with your feelings, with your emotions. The more knowledge you have, the more ability you have to make better decisions on how to proceed.
And I go back to what I said at the beginning about accountability. Let the young person or whoever it is know that you're there with them on this journey. You're going to call the person, the therapist, remove the stigma, and allow them to feel supported on that journey, that you will be there with them. You're going to listen, but you want to act and be direct with them as well. And I think that's key.
Thank you, Alistair, for that. Sort of this, having these talks, checking up on one another, that's not just a one-time thing we do. It's a continuous, it's a relationship where we need to stay connected. Our time is up. Thank you very much for what you shared. It would be very interesting to listen more to what you had to share. I hope still this has been helpful, giving some perspectives from the professional side on how to deal with these issues. So thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I'm happy to have two friends from the North American Division with us right now. It's Rachel Scribner and Pastor Benjamin Griffin. And they have, in the last couple of years, developed an excellent mental health resource called the Mental Health Series. And they're here to tell you about this resource and how it may help you or your friends or your children or whoever might need it. I wonder, would you tell us briefly, why did you develop this resource? What's the background? Why did you do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Torben, for having us on today. The main reason why this mental health series was developed was because there was a need. In our office at NAD Youth Ministries, we try not to produce resources that have no real need because we don't want to be top down. We really want to hear from the ground. And so there were just a barrage of phone calls in 2019 that came to my desk asking for anything on mental health, and I had nothing. And so at that point, we always have this desire that if it's not developed, then it's our responsibility to develop it for the field, because that's what the need is. And so that's how it developed.
Thank you. And that's where you brought in Rachel and others. Can you tell us, what is this mental health resource? Explain it. What is it? Where can we find it?
Yes, absolutely. So when Pastor Van Dion called me, I knew that this wasn't going to be something, even though I enjoy making resources, that I was going to do alone. I knew we needed to have a professional involved because it's so important to get the details right on something like this. And so I contacted Dr. John Betlinski, a psychiatrist at OHSU, and he was willing to help with that, which we were so grateful for. So he and Pastor Gary Parks from the Oregon Conference came in and helped me, and with them, we developed the system of what it was going to look like. And what the resource is it's 6 different parts based on what John taught me about the process of, assessing and also helping to recover from depression and anxiety. So there are 2 guides that help understand depression and understand anxiety. There's one that deals with the deeper issue of suicidal thoughts or thoughts of non-suicidal self-harm, because that deserves its own kind of moment to think about if people are experiencing those. There's a 4th guide that begins to discuss your treatment options. So once you understand what you're dealing with in depression and anxiety, who can you see? How do you find those treatment options? And then the last 3 guides deal with things you can do to recover as you're going through your treatment. There's one on behavioral strategies, so things you can physically do, getting more exercise, getting more sleep, these kinds of things. There's one on cognitive strategies. How do you identify if your thoughts are negative? How do you maybe start to turn that around? These kinds of things. And then the 7th guide is, once you've gotten treatment, once you started to deal with behavioral and cognitive strategies, what can you do to maintain and keep yourself in a good state of mental health?
But I would say every youth leader, every leader, every team who can get their hands on this, even if you're not experiencing anything at this very moment, at least you can engage in these materials so that you know how to manage it and navigate any challenge you may come across mentally.
And
yes, I definitely agree. When you first talked to me, Pastor Vandy, I know you asked about a youth resource, and we did create a very youth-friendly resource, but we didn't create a resource that's only for youth. In fact, it's also open to young adults, and in fact, even adults can use this. It's very wide open, and it's useful for anyone who works with youth or young adults, because there's almost certainly someone in your group dealing with depression or anxiety. It's useful for anyone who is wondering, maybe I have depression or anxiety, and what can I do now? Or I do, and I'm looking for some extra help. And it's useful for anyone who knows someone who's dealing with these things, because you're going to know what kind of advice you can give. So I can't think of very many people who wouldn't benefit from what you can learn.
Thank you, and I agree with that. And then the question is sort of, how can people get it? Where do they find this resource that we are now talking about?
Well, that's a great question, and we have a great answer. OneTeamMentalHealth.org. OneTeamMentalHealth.org. You can access this material there, and it is free. So just go there and download that information, and you'll be tremendously blessed.
That's right. You can download the materials for you to view on your own computer or print out yourself, or if you have access to printing materials and you'd like to distribute them, you can print out the sort of print-ready PDFs, and then you can make the booklets and give them out in your location.
Katia, do you want us to try and play the video from the control room?
Number 11, staring at a wall. First, checking
Everyone, please stand by while we work on the audio issue.
Eyes are much better than humans, so they detect small objects way easier. Then, if insects are not the case, call the animal by its name. If it doesn't look at you or respond in any way, it may be an alarming sign. Reasons vary from tumors, stroke, and head injuries to convulsions and cognitive dysfunction syndrome. Number 10.
Check it out. Videos, not just these documentary series with various stories. They also have short films, there's a documentary film, there's a feature film, and there's also several short clips that, for example, you can share on social media or in other contexts when you want something really short to share. This is a truly great project and resource, and I would recommend that you look at it if you are inspired, if it gives you hope, if it gives you courage, then also share it with someone else who may be in a situation where they are dealing with uncertainty. What we all need to know when things are difficult, when things are challenging, is that we're not alone. That's one of the most comforting things we can experience and know and have, is that whatever difficulties we're going through, we don't go through this alone. And I think this Uncertainty Project really illustrates well how all of us, at some point in life, some phases of life, we may struggle with these issues in various ways. But we don't need to give up. We can still hope, and we should still hold on to faith and hold on to one another. Stay connected with God and with one another.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be back with you again. I think it's been very wide open to our perspectives to know, we have all been passing through many challenges in this moment. We have